15-minute call to talk through and make sure we're, considering all the different legal issues can save you a lot after the fact if we don't handle it correctly.
Success at work, presence at home. For many high-achieving professionals, it feels like you have to choose. On today's episode of the Mitlin Money Mindset, I'm joined by Matt Korn, partner at Fisher Phillips, employment law leader, co-chair of the firm's Reduction in Force Task Force, and the chair of its evaluation committee. Matthew spends his days helping companies navigate complex wage and hour litigation and high-stakes employment decisions. But beyond the courtroom, Matt is a father of four and the founder of Dad Esq, a growing online community supporting lawyer dads who want to win both professionally and personally. If you're a business owner worried about hidden employment risks or a driven parent asking, can I build a meaningful career without sacrificing my family? This conversation will challenge and inspire you, because real wealth isn't just built in the office, it's built in the life you design around it. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Mitlin Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Mitlin Financial. Let's dive into the show. Well, I am super excited today to have Matt Korn with us, and welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So listen, I want to kick off with talking about your entrepreneurial journey. We're going to spend a good amount of time on what you're doing today, but our listeners are always interested in how did you get there? So maybe you could share a little bit of your journey up into becoming an entrepreneur and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a very small town outside of Rochester, New York, and I've been a lifelong Bills fan and hoping to see them. Next year's our year, as always.
Me too.
And I knew I wanted to be a lawyer about 13. I was first generation college grad in my family, so I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I think I watched too much Law and Order and other legal dramas, and I just decided that's what I want to do. And so I ended up going to undergrad in Providence, Rhode Island at Providence College, political science major, thought that's the path, and went straight through to law school. Ended up going to law school at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Loved being in D.C. I went in thinking I was going to be an international lawyer. I'd done a lot of Mile United Nations, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I took my first international law class, and it was a lot of contracts and treaties, and I was like, this is not for me. I'm a extreme extrovert and I like talking to people and meeting people. So that it was just not what I thought it would be when I got into law school. So I started taking some employment law classes and they really, were my favorite courses I took. I got some externships during law school and worked with different companies and organizations doing employment and traditional labor law and just fell in love with it. My first job was at McDonald's and I was promoted to a shift manager while I was there at 17, which was the coolest. You get to hire and then boss around all your friends in high school. There's no better job than that. But I learned a ton I made all the management mistakes you can possibly make at 17 years old and learned a ton. Great training there. And I've always found that, we're always going to have management. We're always going to have employees. How do we make that relationship work really well together? Has always been something super interesting to me. So that's what I love about the work I get to do now is I work with companies and trying to figure out how to best, manage and run the company and take care of the employees.
What I'm hearing is really that first experience that you had working at McDonald's in law school was really what drew you to practicing employment law. It seemed like it grasped your interest. And a lot of times, especially attorneys, they end up entering one form of law because they're interested. And sometimes, a lot of times, they end up shifting along their career. What's been that kind of binding factor for you that's kept you so connected to employment law? Like what juices you up every day?
I am a really weird lawyer who likes math and numbers. And most lawyers you meet will tell you they're a lawyer because they don't like math. And I love math. And so one of the things I get to do in my job is wage and hour advice and counseling and litigation. And so, going into an Excel spreadsheet and figuring out, a potential exposure model, that's one of the things that just gives me joy in my job. And I just like I said, I like interacting with people. So, working with HR, working with in-house legal, doing investigations, meeting people, interviewing them, like all that stuff gives me a lot of joy in the job I have, because I'm not just sitting there reading contracts all day. I get to interact and help people through some difficult stuff. The other part of my job I do a lot of is I'm the co-chair of our reduction in force task force. And so I help companies navigate reductions in force. Sure, tough situations. And I had a job in-house as an in-house counsel for about a year and a half, and I was part of a RIF. So I'm in like kind of a uniquely great place to advise on that, because I've been part of a RIF before, but just helping companies through that difficult process and remembering that, these are people, these aren't just names in a spreadsheet. These are people that, we're going to have to let go to make sure the companies can continue to be successful.
Right. And just to be clear, just in full transparency, you represent the company, not the employee side,
yeah, usually
correct?
As an employment lawyer, you pick one of the two sides. My clients wouldn't love if I started suing them. It would be a conflict, but yeah, we work on the company side. I'm at Fisher Phillips. We're a nationwide, actually international now law firm, about 800 lawyers. I think 45 or 46 offices in the U.S., 3 in Mexico, and 1 in Japan.
A lot of business owners, and that's who listen to our show pretty heavily, they think that they're fine until they're not. And, what's the biggest thing that you see hurting companies long before they need to contact you, an employment attorney? Because a lot of times they don't want to do that up front, right? So they, think they're fine until they're not.
I think that's a great question. One of my lawyers, it's kind of a hazard of the profession. I have clients that call me and they're like, Matt, you're a great guy. I love talking to you, but I hate having to call you. And I get that. I'm like, yep, lawyers, we bill by the 6-minute increments. And I get that part of it. What I try to talk to my clients about is investing in the compliance side, investing in the preventative stuff is really important, because, lawsuits, litigation is super expensive to deal with. I tell my clients, like, if you're going to terminate somebody and you've got that feeling in the pit of your stomach that this isn't going to go well, a 15-minute call to talk through and make sure we're, considering all the different legal issues can save you a lot after the fact if we don't handle it correctly. So it's that, and then compliance from making sure our documents are in order. The employment laws change rapidly, state level, federal level, local level. And so, onboarding packages can create liability. Handbooks, I recommend handbooks be updated at least every 2 years, usually every year. Just policies and procedures you have that they may be commonsensical to a business owner, but they might get you into legal hot water if you don't fully understand all the laws that are in place. And it's, they're complicated, and like I said, ever changing. So it's really the preventative stuff, the compliance stuff that can save you a lot long term if you're being proactive about it.
Yeah. It sounds like the old adage still rings true today. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
I say it a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, if a business owner is listening today and, they were to only change one policy this year, because, business owners, as you know, they have a lot on their plate. But if they were to be able to or evaluate and only change one policy this year, which one, in your opinion, should it be? And why would it matter so much for them to do that?
I mean, it probably depends what state they're in. It depends is a lawyer's favorite answer, by the way. I don't know that. But, it depends is what we like to say. I think a handbook, if you haven't updated your handbook in, several years, it's time to get somebody to look at it. I know a lot of times my clients get them from like SHRM and other organizations, and they're pretty good, but they don't, SHRM, when you get it from them, says like, have a lawyer check this, because sometimes they miss some of the labor law issues that get involved in a handbook. But handbooks are a big one, and we don't I think a lot of times we just think this is just something, the employees aren't going to read it anyways, but like policies in a handbook can create liability even if they're not enforced. And so, we really want to make sure like all the paperwork, really onboarding to onboarding, if we're getting criminal background checks, making sure we're going through the right process with the FCRA and giving disclosure and getting authorization. And it is. I don't know if there's like one particular policy that creates the most risk. It's really looking at it holistically and saying like, are these employees properly being treated as exempt from overtime, for instance? Like that's one that can create a good amount of liability if we improperly classify somebody as exempt. A lot of companies think if we're paying them a salary, they're exempt, but there's other tests that go along with the exemption. There's job duties tests they have to satisfy. So paying somebody a salary alone isn't enough, and just making sure we're covered on all those things, because some of those things if a plaintiff's attorney or the Department of Labor gets a hold of it in an audit or a lawsuit, we're looking back 3 years at everybody that's been in that position, and it gets expensive really quickly if we make a mistake.
And these things are rather nuanced too, right? Because even if you have the most button-up handbook, the most button-up policies and procedures, my experience and understanding is that does not prevent necessarily a potential litigation,
Right.
but it just simply helps you build a case. So if you end up having to go down the litigation route, that it hopefully doesn't last as long and gets quelled early on, right?
Exactly. I always tell clients, if I could prevent employees from suing you, I'd be the wealthiest employment lawyer in America. I can't prevent employees from suing people. What we can do is try to mitigate and minimize risk, right? So having the policies puts us in a better position to defend, making sure we're making fair, consistent decisions that are, documented performance issues. All of those things put us in a better position if we get a lawsuit to be able to defend against the lawsuit. And so, but you're 100% right. You can be as buttoned up as you can, and a disgruntled employee leaves and sues you, and you have to deal with the lawsuit.
Let's take a little bit of a shift for a little bit, because I think one of the great things that you've done is, you are a dad, and your kind of response to the journey that is fatherhood was you founded Dad Esq. Okay. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about, what this online community is and why you created it?
Yeah, sure. I have 4 kids currently. My oldest, MJ, Matthew Jr., is 11, going on 17. And then we have an 8-year-old Joshua, 5-year-old Caleb, and a 3-year-old Madison, who we adopted. Our 3 boys are biological, and we adopted our daughter. So a lot of kids. I'd like to say there's a lot of energy in our house, but they're awesome. And, I look back at my career when we had our first son, MJ, about a year in, I was building a practice. I was a health and safety litigator. I was traveling a lot for work, and my wife was staying home with our son. And probably about a year in, she said, "I feel like a single mom." And that really hit me. I was like, I've got to make a choice here. Am I going to continue pursuing, career at all costs, or am I going to, continue having a wife and children? And so it was a lot of just self-imposed pressure. And I think a lot of lawyers deal with that. It wasn't my firm saying you have to travel all the time, you have to do all this stuff. It was just, I wanted to be successful. And I was like, to do that, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And so I went in-house for about a year and a half. And I mentioned earlier, being part of a reduction in force is kind of interestingly worked its way back into my career. But we had our second son while I was in-house. And since then, we've had 2 other children. And so I created this online community. I actually host it on a platform called Mighty Networks, which is just one of these. So they create a space that you can create. And I just like that it's, there's an app, and it's the only thing on that app for the guys that join this. And so it's not like they're on the Facebook app and this is just part of their Facebook experience. It's a self-contained app, which I really enjoy, because what I'm hoping to create for guys that join Dad Esq is a safe space they can feel comfortable sharing with other people what the struggles they go through are, what the challenges, the wins. We celebrate a lot of wins, new jobs, new babies. We have a birth announcement section. I just want to create that space for them. And so it's a free app, for them to join and participate in the community. We're currently at about 550, a little over 550 members in 44 states and 15 countries, I think. And so it's grown. I started it in January 2025. So in about 14 months, we're already at 550 members. And I expect, well, by the end of the year, at least, maybe beforehand, we'll be at 1,000. So it's been really fun to build, and it's been, I think, meaningful for a lot of the guys that have joined it.
Let's pause for a moment. What actually brings you joy? It's something most people never think about, yet it shapes how your life unfolds. You're busy. You make responsible choices. You even plan ahead. But have you slowed down long enough to ask if what you're building supports a life you enjoy living? That's the reason I built my YouTube channel, to help you bring more joy to your money journey. Sure, we'll talk about all the essentials, but my real goal is to help you connect your finances with what brings you joy, because money is the tool that funds the moments that matter. If you want to explore that connection more deeply, visit my YouTube channel at Larry Sprung. Such a great idea. And, I similarly to you, I have people now, because my kids have been out of the house now for 3-4 years. And it was funny when I started going to conferences, because for a very long time, I did not do that stuff and travel because I wanted to be home and with my boys, as a lot of, our listeners know. When I started going out, people were like, where have you been for, I know you've been in the profession for 20 years. I just saw you for the first time at a conference. Where have you been? And I was like, well, now I have the time and the space to do it. So I really appreciate you kind of creating this community for dads. And I think it's important. How do you envision the Dad Esq community evolving in the next 5 years, especially as conversations around fatherhood shift? What is your big audacious vision for the group?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started thinking about it back in December 2024. I had guys coming to me and just saying, how do you balance being a dad of 4 and being a partner in a big law firm? And so I was like, I want to create this community space for them. And when I sat down in December and started building the community, I think we had like 3 sections at the time. It was not nearly as built out as it is now. And I had 2 guys at my firm that helped me beta test it. And I remember sitting there with them and saying, I don't know if like this is going to be 5 or 10 guys just sitting around a Zoom talking about being better dads, or if it will be bigger than this. But if it's 5 or 10 guys talking about being better dads, it's worth it. And so we launched it January 1 of 2025. And, with anything like this, like there's a lot of ups and downs over the last year and a half. There were times in the beginning it was just me posting into the void, just trying to get people to engage. But it's evolved, and the evolution of it has been largely member driven. And so like some examples of that, when I created it, I thought I'd be clever, and lawyers like sending PTI emails. Pardon the interruption. I get like 10 of them a day. PTI, here's my question. And so I named the chat feature PTI, pardon the interruption. And guys were like, where do we go to chat? And I was like, oh, obviously PTI in the water cooler section. And I thought it was pretty creative and clever, but they were like, we don't know where to go to chat. So now it's called the Dad Chat. Just very simple, very clean. And then, I've had guys join that are like, one guy joined and he said, I really enjoy reading. We should have a book club. And so I was like, great. If we can get 4 or 5 guys that want to do a book club together, we'll create it. So I created that space. More recently, I have 9 people on an advisory board now that are more active members and help me kind of brainstorm where it's going. He was like, we had our second child through IVF, had infertility issues. And, I was just talking to another guy about that. It'd be cool if we had a space for that in Dad Esq. So now we have an alternative family formation where we will have resources and people just ask questions about for IVF, IUI, surrogacy, adoption, and foster. And obviously having adopted a little baby girl, adoption's near and dear to my heart. So for guys that are in the community that are, going through infertility issues or just thinking about other ways they can expand their family, we now have a space. So it's kind of built out like that. What I would like to see over the next year, 2 years, 3 years is more in-person meetups. One of my visions is that we've got 10 or 12 guys in St. Louis, and one of my advisory board members is there. And so they did a happy hour and a coffee event recently in person. And so Dad Esq will be a place where lawyer dads in a particular city can meet on the online app, but then meet up in person and have lunch and have coffee. We had 2 guys in Singapore who never would have met each other. Wow. For Dad Esq, and they grabbed coffee. Oh, one other thing. So we also have just a couple months ago, we started something called the Trusted Provider Network. So in that same vein of connecting people to resources, we now have, I think we're at 5 or 6 trusted providers. We're going to roll out one a week. But people that provide services or sell to lawyer dads, and they go through an application process, an interview, vetting process. I want to connect people in the community to people that, work with lawyer dads, that understand, things that lawyer dads deal with and can best support and are bought into the vision and the mission behind what we're doing at Dad Esq. So that's, again, something that just came up because somebody said, "Hey, I'd like to sponsor you for a year." And I said, "Well, what does that look like? How do we build that up?" So it's, I wish I had a 5-year plan. I probably should, but I'm also working 2 full-time jobs and have 4 kids. So
yeah. A lot on your plate. Well, they say give something, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, right? Yep. So Here you go. So, what, and I think I may know where this is going to go, but I mean, you're very visible online building this community for dads-in-law. What made you comfortable? Because I think a lot of business owners, have ideas and have vision and want to do these things, but then they're not really comfortable putting themselves out there to actually do it and explain that what their mission is. What made you comfortable putting yourself out there in this regard to start, putting together and growing this great group of dads?
Yeah, that is another really good question. When I started it, I wasn't very nervous about that, truthfully. And I think you're exactly right. A lot of people starting something, that there's that, if I put myself out there, what kind of response is it going to get? I've also created a community for lawyer dads. And I was, I talked to lawyer moms at my firm, to my wife. I'm like, I don't want this to come across in a way. There is a wonderful community called Mothers Esquire that's been around since 2013 for lawyer moms. And they have about 10,000 members. Great. Anyone that's listening that knows a lawyer mom should send them there. And there are other lawyer mom communities. But there wasn't something for lawyer dads. It just didn't exist. And so that helped. I was like, it just doesn't exist. I actually looked for a community so that I could just join it, but it didn't exist. So I decided to create it. For a long time last year, I posted primarily. LinkedIn has been the best way for me to connect with people who are interested in joining the community. And so I posted from a company page. Anybody that's ever tried to grow anything on LinkedIn can tell you it's not the right strategy to try to grow a company page. It's really tough. But as I got more and more comfortable with the feedback I was getting was super positive. Not just lawyer dads who were excited to join the community, but moms and women, professionals that were like, this space is needed. Like, guys need a space like this. They need a safe space to, because a lot of men are just, the isolation's a big thing for lawyers, and men generally, and just this kind of stereotypical, but men generally aren't the first ones to open up about their feelings, about their struggles. And so creating a space where they can feel safe enough to do that with a group of people that, aren't going to judge them, aren't going to, say anything bad, they're going to support them, is important. And so as I got more comfortable with that, started posting more from my personal page too. And I think that's helped it really grow.
That's amazing. For those that are out there that are listening, what's one myth that you can debunk or would like to debunk about being a quote unquote successful lawyer and a great dad? Because I'm sure there are myths out there about the struggles of doing that. It can't be done. It can be done. What's one myth that you would love to debunk around that concept of being a successful lawyer and great dad?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's more, I think for a lot of lawyer dads, it is the opposite almost, that I feel like I'm not being a successful lawyer or not being a successful dad. There's this guilt that we carry in two respects. Like when we're at work, and we have a mediation that runs late and we miss the soccer game, or we have to get a brief done and so we miss bedtime, right? So there's this guilt associated with, I know I'm providing, I'm being a successful lawyer. I'm doing what I need to do at my job, but I feel guilt associated with not missing certain things or not being as present at home as I want to be. And then there's the guilt at home where we take that 4-day weekend, or we, take our kids on a trip, or our kids are, we leave early from the office, and then we start feeling guilt about, I'm falling behind a little bit at work. And I think that the myth is that we're the only one that is facing that. Like, we look around and we see other people performing at a high level. To me, that's the essence of community. My wife and I lead a small group at our church, and have for 10 years, of married couples with kids. And I never forget, this is really pivotal to why I created this community, is like, we were in a group early on, and some couple said they had an argument about something. And I nudged my wife. I was like, we had that same argument yesterday. And it was just a light bulb moment for me, that the things that we feel, the things that we think are, just we're the only ones facing this struggle. Our marriage is on the rocks. And then you realize, no, that's like a normal married couples thing. And we're not the only ones going through that. I think that's the myth for lawyers. Is like, I'm the only one who is facing it, because most lawyers aren't on LinkedIn talking about, the guilt or the stress or the pressure, right? That's what kind of makes my post stand out, is that I'm talking about that stuff openly. Most lawyers aren't doing that. And I think it's healthy for us to talk about that guilt that we feel, that stress, that pressure. Mental health is a big thing for lawyers. And when we feel isolated and we're just trying to do it on our own and trying to be the best lawyer we can be, the best dad we can be, like, at some point you hit a breaking point if you don't have other people to share with and talk to. So that's to me, it's the myth of, it's the comparison game. I'm looking at everybody else's Instagram, and they're on family vacations and they're crushing it at work. And, but guess what? They have the same feelings of guilt and isolation, all the things that you do. You're seeing the highlight reel. And I want Dad Esq to be the highlight reel. I want it to be the real, we're in the trenches together.
It's like that the photo that you see of the iceberg, right, in the water. All you see is the top, what's above the water, but you don't see all the work and everything that's going on below the water level. And that's the same thing, right? Everybody sees what's on top, the success, et cetera, being a good dad, being a good lawyer, but they don't see what work took to get there. So it's great that you're creating that space for lawyers and dads to talk about that. Now, I know as part of this and part of what you do, mentoring is central to, what you do and who you are, and I think, there are a lot of young lawyers entering or in the profession today. What's one piece of advice you could leave with a young lawyer today about building a career? Because maybe they're at a point where they're married, don't have kids, or maybe they're not even married yet. But, obviously you have a lot of experience. You have this collection of dads that have a lot of experience. So what's one piece of advice we can give, a young lawyer today about building a career in law?
I think probably the most helpful thing, if I had lived by this back when I was an associate, it would have helped me, is just remembering it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And, a legal career is a long career, right? Most lawyers, not all, we have plenty of lawyer dads in our community that are doing law as a second, third career. But for a lot of lawyers, they're coming straight out of college or take a year off. They're in their 20s when they start, probably 40 plus years of law practice ahead of you. And, when I was starting out as an associate, you just see the partners and what they're doing, what they're earning. You're like, I want to get there. And, instead, like, sitting down and saying, I have a long career ahead of me, and it's okay. It's going to take X amount of time, and I'm okay with that. And during that time, I'm going to hone my skills. I'm going to become, I always tell new associates in my office, like, that first 2-3 years, just learn the foundational stuff. Just become a really good lawyer. Law school, I don't think, really prepares people to practice law as well as it could. And so just learn how to be a better writer, learn the substantive law, whatever it is. For us, it's employment law, but read the statutes, read the regulations, just become, just be intellectually curious. Learn all that stuff before you worry about getting clients and making partner and all that stuff. I think I know I had this, mentality of I just need to get there really quickly. I need to, go to all these conferences, meet all these people, get to partner as fast as I can. And it probably would have been better for my mental health along the way if I just recognized I'm where I am right now, and that's okay. That's probably I think a lot about mental health. It's a very stressful job, especially when you have kids, and a lot of lawyers, moms and dads, you're having kids in that time when, you're trying to make partner often, and that just creates a ton of stress. So giving yourself some grace and saying, you know what, this is, it's okay to be where I am. And, I still have ambitions. I still have goals, but they might not be this year. It might be a few years down the road, and that's okay. I've got a long career ahead of me.
Yeah. Perspective is so important, and thank you for sharing that, because I think that's great advice, and I agree with you. I do a lot of work in mental health, and I think you have to take care of your mental health, your physical health, and your financial health. They're all equally important, because if you're failing in one of those areas, it really has an impact on the rest of your being. So thank you for sharing that, and we end each of our shows by asking our guests the same question, and our listeners are always waiting to hear these answers, because we are the Mitlin Money Mindset, but we are also all about joy on this show, and you've given us a lot of joy today. So I ask you, what did you do today, Matt, that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
So it's still pretty early for me in the day. I think for me, the thing that brings me joy is seeing my kids. They got up, went to school, and just being around my kids. I'm working from home today, so I'll get to see them when they get home from school, and that brings me a lot of joy. My wife's awesome, and so just being around my family is really important to me.
Love it. Love it. I'm very similar in that vein, so I can appreciate that greatly, and thank you for sharing that. Now, Matt, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes, but if people want to learn more about you, learn more about the community, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My last name is Korn, like the famous rock band from the 90s. I was born before then, so I think they took it from me, but and the community, we have a website, it's dadesq.com. And that has a link to, if you're a lawyer, dad, to join the community as well.
Awesome. I love Korn, by the way, and I hope your Bills have a good off season and come back stronger in next season with their new coach.
Josh is having a baby, so I just need him to go to law school, and then I can get him in the community too.
There you go. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your time with us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Matthew Korn reminds us that success doesn't have to come at the expense of the people who matter most. As a partner at Fisher Phillips navigating complex employment law and wage and hour litigation, and as the founder of Dad Esq, a thriving community for lawyer dads, he's proving that leadership at work and presence at home can coexist. If you're a business owner wanting to protect your company from costly employment mistakes, or a driven professional striving to be both exceptional in your career and intentional with your family, this episode is your reminder that real wealth is built through alignment. Money, mindset, fatherhood, and leadership. When those work together, everything changes. Matthew Korn and everything he's up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.